Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Let your arms go heavy, your breath slow. And as you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing what time it is, where you are, and what city or village you're listening from. It's love to know. And if you'd like more quiet stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe so they gently appear when you need them most. Now, let's begin. You lie still, wrapped in blankets, wrapped in quiet. Hand beneath you, deeper than floorboards, deeper than roots. The earth moves, not quickly, not in jolts or shakes, taze, but in slow, imperceptible drift. The ground beneath you is not still. It is never still. You might imagine the earth as solid, fixed, a reliable cradle for your home, your street, your entire sky. But in truth, the planet is more like a great sleeping animal. Its skin, the crust you live on, shifts gently as it dreams. Beneath that crust, the deeper earth flows, not like water, it's not like air, but like something ancient, a slow, viscous breath. The mantle moves, and floating upon it are giant pieces of Earth's surface, tectonic plates. The continents, Africa, Asia, North and South America, are not bolted to anything. They drift like lily pads on a hidden pond. Slowly, gently, relentlessly. You live on one of these drifting rafts. It feels like land, but it is a traveler, moving a few centimeters each year, less than your fingernail grows. And yet, over time, that tiny motion changes everything. It is how oceans open. It is how mountains rise. It is how continents part and later collide again. You are held by a planet in motion. And that motion writes the story of your world. If you were to press your ear to the ground, you would not hear creaking. No groans, no rumbles. But if you could feel time the way the earth does, over eons, not hours, you would feel the motion. You would sense continents sliding past one another. You would feel islands forming in fire and others disappearing beneath waves. Even now, beneath your body, the plate you rest on might be moving toward another, or away, or sliding past. The motion is so slow, it feels like stillness, but over millions of years, that stillness becomes change. What seems eternal, the shape of your coastline, the line of your mountains, is temporary. And not just temporary, alive. Alive in the way that only slow things are alive. With patience, with force, with memory. Once all the continents were one, a single massive landmass. Pangaea. It held all forests, all deserts, all rivers. One world, one shape. And then, slowly, it cracked. Not with violence, but with inevitability. Over time, it separated, broke into pieces, and those pieces began to move. The Atlantic Ocean opened, not with a flood, but with a widening breadth. Africa drifted east. India sailed north. South America turned away like a page curling in the sun. And now, the map, But it too is only a moment, temporary arrangement, because the plates are still moving, even tonight. Even now, beneath your quiet bedroom, a great crust of earth is gliding on soft, hot rock. On the slow tides of the mantle, you cannot feel it, but your world is surfing on molten stone. You are a passenger on a restless planet, and the earth does not ask you permission to move. It just does. But perhaps, if you lie very still, you can imagine it. Not the motion, but the feeling of being part of something that moves so slowly. It feels eternal. The ground beneath you is not a floor. It is a raft, floating on heat. It's carrying mountains and valleys and cities like whispers on a breeze. It will not tip. It will not throw you, but it will carry you. It already is. Sometimes, the earth forgets its gentleness. The plates lock, tension builds, and then a slip. An earthquake. But even that suddenness is born from years of invisible pressure, from slow struggle beneath the surface, and then it settles. The pressure releases, and the plates continue, still moving, still drifting, like breath beneath stillness, like thought beneath sleep. You are not separate from this motion. You are part of it. Your life unfolds on this drifting skin. Every building, every mountain, every memory anchored to something that is not anchored at all. Close your eyes. Imagine the planet in slow motion. Imagine millions of years passing like seconds. Continents become dancers, spinning, parting, meeting again. Oceans open, ridges rise, valleys fall. The map changes again and again, but Earth does not mind. It does not cling, simply moves. And you, for this brief moment, you are carried. You are cradled by motion, not jolted, not thrown, but softly, imperceptibly, moved forward. You sleep on a raft of stone, and it drifts through time. There is a comfort in knowing that stillness is an illusion, that what feels permanent is actually in flux, that nothing is locked, not land, not memory, not even the self. You, too, move, even as you rest, not just across days and years, but in who you are, what you believe, what you become. Like the earth, you are not fixed. You drift, slowly, gently, into new versions of yourself. And that is not instability. It is growth. The ground beneath you moves, but it does not leave you behind. It carries you, shapes the world you walk. And when you feel uncertain, when change feels too fast, remember that the deepest changes move with great patience. They do not rush, they do not panic, they drift. And still, they reshape everything, like the plates beneath your feet, like the continents beneath the clouds, like the earth beneath your resting body. You've seen the map, maybe in a textbook or hanging quietly in a classroom, that familiar spread of colored shapes, continents outlined like islands of memory. Africa on one side, South America across the Atlantic. Their edges echo one another, not just similar, but hauntingly exact, like puzzle pieces once connected, then torn apart. Their jagged coasts whisper a secret. We were once together, and they were, long ago, not yesterday, not last century, but deep in geologic time. Those shapes touched, not metaphorically, but physically. One single supercontinent, Pangaea, all the continents, all the forests, deserts, and rivers, locked together in one vast embrace, a landmass so large you could walk from what would become Antarctica to what would become Siberia without ever touching ocean. And then they began to drift apart, not suddenly, not violently, but with the same patience that carries mountains upward or rivers slowly toward the sea. Over hundreds of millions of years, the land broke into pieces. It wasn't shattering, it was rearrangement. Africa moved east, South America turned west. India wandered alone, a fast-moving traveler, destined to crash into Asia and lift the Himalayas into the clouds. Australia sailed free, adrift like a dream. And what you now call a world map is only a snapshot, one single frame in a long, slow film of Earth's surface, shifting like sleep. You rest on one of these pieces. It feels whole. It feels like all there is. But every border, every edge of land is a remnant of that ancient tear. A scar of separation. The continents remember, in their shapes, in their stone, in the fossils buried where desert met rainforest. They carry echoes of forests once shared, animals once roaming together before the seas opened and time layered them with dust. Even now, on the coasts of Brazil and the shores of West Africa, you can find matching fossils, identical species, separated not by fate, but by drift, not extinction. It's distance, the kind of distance you don't feel at first, the kind that accumulates over millennia, like an old friend you haven't seen, like a version of yourself you almost remember being. The Atlantic Ocean is still growing. The seafloor spreads slowly, adding inches each year between continents like breath between words. If you were to float in space and watch Earth in fast forward, you would see the continents move as if repelled and drawn by some invisible tide. But From here, from where you lie, it looks like stillness. This is the paradox of deep time. Everything is changing, but none of it feels rushed. Like healing, like memory, like becoming. Imagine standing at the tip of South America's eastern coast, the air warm, the waves gentle. Now imagine walking east across a vanished land bridge, back through millions of years, until your feet touch the western edge of Africa. The two coasts fit, not just in shape, but in spirit, as if they still miss one another. And perhaps they do. Rocks, remember? They hold magnetic signatures, fossils, mineral lines, evidence of where they once were. Geologists trace these memories, layer by layer, like piecing together an old photograph torn into pieces and scattered across the globe. Each clue, each sediment layer, a whisper from the time when all land touched. The earth doesn't mourn, it rearranges. Pangaea was not the first supercontinent. There were others, Rodinia, Gondwana, and there will be more. The land will come together. Again, not tomorrow, but eventually. A future supercontinent, already forming beneath our awareness. Maybe all the pieces will reunite on the other side of the planet. Maybe new mountains will rise where oceans now sleep. But the process is the same. Pull apart, drift, and someday return. It is the breath of the earth. Inhale, exhale, together, apart again. And what about you? What parts of your life once fit perfectly, only to drift? What friendships, habits, places, or versions of yourself now feel distant, but still familiar, not broken, just moved, carried gently by time? Maybe you too are a puzzle piece once attached to something greater. Maybe the shape of your longing matches a memory left behind. That doesn't mean you are incomplete. It means you remember. Like the continents do, your contours shaped by connection and separation. Your edges softened by the waves of time. There is no tragedy in drifting. The continents do not apologize for moving apart. They grow, they evolve. They form new mountains, new climates, new stories, and sometimes they come back together. Your changes are no different. You do not have to remain in the shape you began. You can shift. You can become. And in the space between what was and what will be, new oceans form that new possibility, new stillness. So tonight, as you lie quietly, think of the map on your wall. Look not at where the continents are, but where they were, and where they will be. Imagine the planet breathing. Imagine the land drifting slowly under stars that never notice. And remember, the world you live on was once whole, was once different, and will be again. You are not lost. You are not static. You are simply between shapes, like Africa and South America, like memory beside longing, still fitting, just not touching. You walk across stone and think the world is still. Mountains rise behind you. The ocean hushes its waves nearby. A trail of dust curls from your shoes, and it feels like permanence. But underneath you, deeper than memory, beneath the cities, in roots and rivers, the earth flows, not fast, not furious, but with a quiet persistence that never ends. The mantle, that wide layer between the crust and the core, is neither liquid nor solid. It is both. It is soft rock, not molten like fire, but softened like wax just before it melts. Imagine honey, warmed by a distant sun. It holds its shape till it doesn't. That's the mantle. It stretches, presses, circulates, not in minutes, not in hours, but in epochs. It moves inches per year, so slowly that a single shift could take lifetimes to notice. But it moves, and what's above it? The crust, continents, the puzzle pieces from before, ride along like passengers on a train made of softened stone. You don't feel it, not in your heartbeat, not in your step, but the earth feels it. It shows it in ridges that rise, in valleys that stretch, in earthquakes that murmur, in volcanoes that breathe. The continents are not driving themselves. They are carried quietly on the back of something ancient and slow. This is convection, a deep, circular motion of heat rising, cooling, falling, and rising again. It's not a furnace. It's a dance, a cycle that begins not at the surface, but far below, where heat from the Earth's core pushes upward like breath from a sleeping giant. You've never touched the mantle. No one has. It lies too deep, more than 1,000 miles down in places, but its influence reaches you in every mountain, every volcano, every place where the earth has cracked or stretched. It's easy to forget that the surface you walk on is only a skin, thin, fragile, and floating. If the earth were an apple, the crust would be its peel. Everything beneath is volume, weight, motion. Sometimes the mantle rises, not completely, just a piece, melting its way upward through cracks in the crust. This is how volcanic islands are born, like Hawaii, formed not by the edge of plates, but by hotspots where mantle heat bursts through. As the mantle swells, it pushes up magma. The magma cools, solidifies, and eventually becomes land. A quiet birth, a slow rising, stone from below, becoming the ground for trees, for birds, for people. Islands, born from the breath of the deep. Other times, the mantle pulls, tugs at the crust above, stretching it until it breaks. Rift valleys form, like the East African Rift, a place where it's wheeze. Land is tearing apart, not from anger, but from pressure within. This too is the mantle, not raging, but changing, not violent, but inevitable. And all the while, the plates on the surface float, gliding on currents they cannot see. It's as if the earth is trying to reshape itself from within, not with urgency, but with intention. You might think that something moving so slowly is easy to ignore, but slowness does not mean silence. The Grand Canyon took millions of years to be carved by water. The Himalayas took just as long to rise. The Atlantic Ocean still widens with every breath. Slow changes leave permanent marks. So does the mantle. It's the artist beneath the canvas, shaping every mountain you see, every continent you've mapped, and every coastline you've traced with your eyes, without ever being seen itself. And maybe that's how transformation works. Not all change is visible at the surface. Some of it happens deep within, slow, it's quiet, persistent, like the part of you that shifts over time, not loudly, not overnight, but slowly. Beneath the layer, you show the world, beliefs softening, dreams reshaping, new strength rising from where it was once hidden. The mantle doesn't erupt, it flows, and so do you. The next time you look at a globe, run your finger across the continents. Remember, they are not fixed. They are in motion because something unseen moves them. And the next time you feel like you haven't changed, remember the mantle? Remember that some shifts are too deep to notice until one day you wake up and the landscape of your life has rearranged itself. The ground beneath your feet feels eternal. Mountains seem fixed. Continents feel like boundaries that never move. It's how humans thought for most of history, that the earth was stable, that it did not wander, that land stayed where it was, placed. But truth doesn't rush. It waits. It lets the world be still until someone, somewhere, notices something that doesn't quite fit. In 1912, a man named Alfred Wegener noticed. He wasn't a geologist. He studied weather, but he saw something others had missed, or perhaps ignored. Look at the map, he said. Really look. Africa and South America, like two pieces of a broken plate. The edges, jagged and familiar, similar to be coincidence. It wasn't just the shape. Fossils of the same creatures, on continents now divided by oceans. Rock layers, identical, separated by thousands of miles of sea. Coal from tropical plants found near the Arctic. Glaciers once scraping across the Sahara. Wegener called it continental drift. He imagined a supercontinent, Pangaea, all the land as one, long ago, before it cracked and drifted apart. But people laughed. They said it was impossible. They said the continents were too big, too heavy. How could they move? A force could drag entire lands across the earth. Wegener didn't have the answer, okay? He had the intuition, but not the mechanism. And so the world tucked his idea away. Not wrong, just too strange. Too early. Wegener died in 1930, lost in Greenland's ice, his theory still buried, waiting for the Earth to speak again. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that the planet offered its proof. Scientists studying the ocean floor discovered something unexpected. Long, underwater mountain chain winding through the oceans, the mid-ocean ridges, and around those ridges, the seafloor was spreading, new crust forming at the center, pushing older rock outward, like a scar that never quite healed, opening gently with time. This was the missing piece. The Earth wasn't fixed, it was dynamic. It created land, destroyed land, and it moved. The idea of plate tectonics was born. The Earth's outer shell isn't a single, solid skin. It's a puzzle of plates, floating on the mantle, shifting. Over time, some plates crash, some pull apart, some slide past each other. Where they meet, they make mountains. They cause earthquakes. They build islands in open oceans. Suddenly, everything made sense. Volcanoes, tsunamis, the Himalayas, canes, the San Andreas Fault. They weren't separate mysteries, they were chapters of the same quiet story. Plate tectonics wasn't just a theory, it was a revelation, a map to Earth's memory, a new way of understanding why the world looks the way it does. And in that shift, it's from ridicule to acceptance. Science did what it always does best. It grew. It let go of certainty. It opened itself to motion, just like the continents. You might wonder why it took so long, why something so clear was ignored for so many years. But truth isn't always loud. It whispers. It requires patience, curiosity, humility. The Earth was moving. We just hadn't learned how to watch yet. Now, we know. We know that Africa is slowly drifting north, that the Atlantic Ocean is widening, inch by inch, that India is still crashing into Asia, raising the Himalayas a little more each year. We can measure the movement with satellites, with lasers, with clocks, but behind the math is a deeper message, that everything moves, even what seems still, even what seems impossible. And so the theory that changed the Earth wasn't just about geology. It was about belief. It showed us that the world doesn't need our permission to change. It just does. That sometimes the truth feels like a puzzle piece you didn't know was missing until suddenly everything fits in wedginess time. It was radical to imagine the ground moving. Now, it's foundational. Science, like the Earth, evolves through shifts, some slow, some sudden, and all of them necessary. You look at a mountain, and it feels timeless, fixed, immovable, a monument not only to height, but to permanence. But that stillness is an illusion. Beneath the snow, beneath the stone, beneath even the stories told about it, the mountain is moving, not quickly, not wildly, but surely, rising, eroding, changing. Mountains are not eternal. They are alive, not in breath, but in becoming. To begin understanding them, you must first listen to the quiet collision of tectonic plates, not the crash of disaster, the long hum of pressure against pressure. The Himalayas, that towering chain of peaks, exists because two ancient land masses are still pressing against one another. India pushing into Asia, as it has for over 50 million years. It's an embrace so slow it would take lifetimes to notice a shift. And yet, the Earth feels it. the mountains rise. You may picture this like hands meeting at the palms and pressing together, gently but constantly. Between them, the skin wrinkles, lines form. That's how mountains are born. The crust folds, buckles, rises, layer upon ancient layer, rock upon rock, until what was once ocean floor becomes the roof of the world. On Everest, you stand atop marine limestone, once beneath waves. Now, above the clouds, the shells of long-dead sea creatures form the uppermost heights, proof that what is high was once unimaginably low. The journey from seabed to summit is not metaphor, it is geology. It is time, stacked and lifted. Not all mountains come from collision. Some rise from rifting, from the pulling apart of plates, where magma wells up and cools into ridges of black basalt. Some come from hotspots, plumes of molten rock rising from deep within the mantle, building islands like Hawaii, one hardened lava flow at a time. Some mountains are volcanic, fiery, restless, built not by compression, but by eruption. But most, the oldest, the grandest, are the result of slow pressure over slow time. In the Appalachian Mountains of North America, you find softened peaks, weathered curves. These are ancient mountains, once tall, now worn down by rain, wind, and the steady, grinding memory of ice. They are older than birds, older than flowers, older than the Atlantic Ocean. Yet still, they move, not upward now, but downward, giving themselves back to the low places. Erosion is not destruction. It is continuation. A mountain rises and is worn down again. The dust from one peak becomes the sediment of a plain. The minerals from one slope feed the life of a valley. Nothing is wasted, only transformed. You may think of a mountain as a place. You go to escape movement, to find silence, to find stillness. And in a way, you do, because motion, at that height, is so slow, you feel it as peace. But it is still motion, the kind that shapes without breaking, the kind that speaks in stone. Consider the Andes, stretching along the western edge of South America. They form where the oceanic Nazca Plate slides beneath the South American plate. Subduction. One plate diving, another riding upward. Here, the rise is not just height, but heat. Volcanoes cluster. Earthquakes rumble. And the land itself climbs skyward, inch by inch, century by century. It is never done in Africa. The East African Rift is pulling the continent apart. One day, millions of years from now, a new ocean may form there. But today, the stretching creates highlands, plateaus, volcanic peaks, Kilimanjaros, Mount Kenyas, new summits where Earth begins again. Even Antarctica, beneath its frozen blanket, hides mountains. The Gambartsov Range, entombed beneath miles of ice, visible to the eye, but no less real. Proof that even what we cannot see still moves, still rises, still leaves shape in the silence. Now, imagine this. You are lying on a soft patch of earth. The ground feels still, but there is quiet, okay? But miles beneath you, two plates are pressing against one another, okay? Not in violence, but in patience. And somewhere, though you may never feel it, a mountain is rising because of that pressure, because of that waiting, because the earth does not need urgency to create something vast. Maybe your life is a mountain. Maybe you are rising, not in leaps and bounds, but in centimeters per century. Maybe your strength isn't in your peaks, but in the time it took to reach them, in the slow, folded layers of memory, experience, resistance. Maybe you're not supposed to feel tall every day. Maybe you're just supposed to keep becoming. And maybe erosion is not loss. Maybe it's a gift, a reminder that nothing is static, that even the tallest parts of you can soften, can feed a valley, can shape the world around you by letting go. You look at a mountain now, and you see more than height. You see motion. You see process. You see the earth telling a story without words. And it says, here is how you grow. Slowly, through pressure, through folding, through time, not all at once, but endlessly. You lie back and imagine the ocean, not the crashing waves at the surface, but the silent, pressurized dark beneath. A realm without light, without urgency, where something extraordinary is always happening. Even if no one sees it, down there, far below the warmth of sunlight, the seafloor is splitting, not violently, not suddenly, but quietly, with a calm rhythm of geologic breath. The earth is making room, just pulling itself apart, just enough to let new crust be born. This is called seafloor spreading. It is the ocean's slowest secret. Imagine two tectonic plates drifting away from one another, inch by inch, year by year, not in anger, but in release. Between them, a gap opens, not wide, just enough, okay? And into that gap, the mantle rises. Molten rock, drawn upward by nothing more than space and need. When the magma reaches the cold of the ocean floor, it cools, it hardens, it becomes stone, and that stone becomes the new bottom of the sea. This is not rare. This is not occasional. It is constant, as steady as your breath while you sleep. Along the mid-Atlantic ridge, from the icy edges of Iceland to the heat of the South Atlantic, the seafloor is widening, not quickly, only a few centimeters a year, but in geologic time, that is a heartbeat. The Atlantic Ocean, the vast blue expanse between continents, still getting wider, breath by breath, stone by stone. You don't feel it, standing on a beach. You don't sense the distance changing, but the continents are shifting, ever so gently. The Americas drifting westward, Europe and Africa inching east. If you could watch from above, not for a year, not for a lifetime, but for millions of years, you would see a dance, a slow unfolding, as land unknots itself from land. It's easy to think of Earth's crust as solid, unchanging, but the crust is more like cracked skin on a living sphere, and the places where it splits are full of promise. These spreading centers are more than boundaries. They are birthplaces. Here, Earth begins again, at the very center of these ridges. Black smokers rise tall chimneys, built by minerals, spewing superheated water from deep within the planet. It is dark, it is toxic, and it is alive. Around these vents, life thrives. Without sunlight, bacteria feed on chemicals. Tube worms and crabs gather in alien stillness. An entire ecosystem is built not on light, but on the Earth's own breath. This is life where continents open. This is life in the deepest part of silence. Proof that beginnings don't always look like spring. Sometimes they look like heat and blackness and pressure. Sometimes they look like the bottom of the world. If you stood on the ridge, if you could withstand the darkness, the pressure, the absence of air, you would see the two sides of the sud, ocean floor moving apart. You would feel not a push, but a pull, an invitation, a parting of stone that says, let something new enter. The basalt that forms at these ridges is dark, dense, rich in iron and magnesium. It doesn't shine, it doesn't shimmer, but it carries the memory of Earth's core, and as it cools, its minerals align with the planet's magnetic field, like tiny compasses. They record the direction of the poles, so when scientists drill into the seafloor, they find stripes, alternating bands of magnetism, pointing this way, then that, like chapters in a book written in stone. This is how we know that the crust spreads, 'cause the rocks remember. Even when we forget, the Earth does not. You may never see the mid-Atlantic ridge. You may never feel the pulse of magma rising, but you are shaped by it. The continents you call home are where they are because of this hidden widening. The land beneath your city, your forest, your farm, was once connected to something else, and it moved because the ocean opened. You are living in a world that is always rearranging itself, not in chaos, but in slow conversation. The earth stretches, and the ocean listens. The ocean opens, and the continents answer. And somewhere in the middle, without sound, without light, new ground is born. Think of your own life. A part of you is slowly pulling apart, not in loss, but in renewal. What space is opening that once felt closed? What magma is rising deep within you, ready to become something new? You don't need a rupture. You don't need an explosion. You just need a little room, a little separation, and the courage to let the unknown rise. The earth teaches that beginnings can come from letting go, that growth can come from making space, that even in darkness, even under pressure, something good can form. The Atlantic grows wider, the ridge breathes, the crust spreads, and you are part of a planet that is always making more of itself, from within, from beneath, from silence. You followed the rise, the spreading ridge, the quiet birth of new ocean floor. But every ascent has its opposite. Now you descend, not in failure, but in purpose. Not to disappear, but to transform. This is subduction. It's a slow return of Earth's crust into the depths it came from. It happens where plates meet, not in openness, but in overlap. One slips beneath the other, a silent, downward fold. Stone returning to fire. Picture it. Two plates pressed together. Neither wants to yield, but one does. Heavier, older, cooler. It bends, just slightly, and begins to sink. This is not collapse. This is choreography. The descending plate slides beneath its partner, down through the crust, down into the mantle. The journey is slow, hundreds of kilometers, millions of years, but it is sure, and it is powerful. You might expect chaos, cracking, breaking, but subduction is quieter than that. It's a kind of surrender. The returning of material to where it began. The crust that once formed at a spreading ridge now completes its arc. Not gone, but returned, like a breath let go. This place where plates meet, where one is swallowed by another, is called a subduction zone. These zones mark some of the most powerful places on Earth. Here, continents collide. Here, mountains rise. Here, deep trenches form where the surface dips toward the center. You may have heard of the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of Earth's ocean. It is a subduction zone. The Pacific Plate, old and dense, dives beneath the Philippine Plate. At its deepest point, the ocean floor falls nearly 11 kilometers below the surface. More than the height of Mount Everest, but downward. But even this depth is not the end. The sinking plate continues, down into the upper mantle, where heat and pressure begin to reshape it. Minerals transform. Water, trapped in the rock, is released, and that water changes everything. It softens the mantle above, making it melt more easily. That melt rises, and where it reaches the surface, volcanoes form. So the sinking of one plate feeds the fire of the sky. Subduction zones are cradles of volcanic arcs. Japan, the Andes, the Pacific Northwest. Wherever plates dive, mountains of fire rise. You see, nothing is wasted. Even descent feeds ascent. Even disappearance leads to creation. The ocean floor, born at a ridge, travels thousands of miles, only to be taken in, broken down, and turned into something new. Sometimes, as the sinking plate descends, it gets stuck. Pressure builds, friction tightens, and then, suddenly, release. The plate jerks downward, the overriding plate bounces upward, and the earth quakes. This is where the largest earthquakes happen. The 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, the Arling E.E. Tohoku quake in Japan. Both began with subduction, with the quiet pressure of one plate sliding beneath another until the strain could no longer hold. Even in that violence, there is no malice, just release, realignment. The crust adjusts itself because it must. 'Cause the balance of forces demands it. Subduction is not only downward, T's shapes the world upward too. K. The Andes rise because the oceanic Nazca plate sinks beneath South America. As the plate dives, it lifts the edge of the continent slowly, relentlessly. You walk on mountains that exist because of what lies beneath them. But the subducting plate doesn't disappear entirely. It melts, yes, but pieces remain. Some form slabs that sink deeper still into the lower mantle, perhaps all the way to the core mantle boundary. There they linger, cold memories in a sea of fire. We call them slab graveyards. Old pieces of crust resting in the deep, still moving, still remembered. The earth keeps its past, not in books, but in layers. And subduction is how it writes each new page. Teach you that not everything that sinks is lost, okay? That descent can be an act of transformation, okay? That surrender can lead to fire, to mountains, to life. You've learned to see success in upward motion, in growth, in expansion. But sometimes, to rise, something must give way. Sometimes, letting go is the only way forward. Beneath your feet, a plate may be diving. Right now, quietly, it has done so for millions of years, okay? And it will continue long after you're gone. This movement doesn't demand your attention, but it holds you just the same. You walk atop stories that began in surrender. Think of your own crust, the surface you present to the world. What parts of it are heavy, dense with age, ready to return to something deeper? What in you is melting, reforming, quietly preparing to rise again as something else? Even the hardest parts of you can become fertile ground for something new. Even the oldest stories can be rewritten in fire and pressure. Even you can subduct and still be whole. This is Earth's rhythm. Creation, motion, return. Not a cycle, but a spiral. Always becoming, always reshaping, always learning what it means to let go and still remain. You followed the descent, plates slipping beneath plates, crust returning to fire, okay? Now you arrive where fire rises again. Around the edge of the Pacific, a great circle glows. Not in light, but in tension. It's a silent blaze, etched deep into the earth. This is the ring of fire. It is not a myth, not a metaphor. It is the living margin where the planet reshapes itself through heat, through pressure, through the breath of stone. Asterisk, the ring of fire wraps around the Pacific Ocean like a slow exhalation of the Earth's memory. It is not a ring of flames, but of transformation, of places where the crust is thin, or broken, or shifting just enough to let magma rise. From the southern tip of South America, up along the spine of the Andes, through Central America and Mexico, into the forests of California, the snowy ridges of the Cascades, the volcanic line of Alaska, across the trembling islands of Japan, down through the Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and finally New Zealand. This horseshoe of heat holds about 75% of the world's active volcanoes. It is one of the most geologically active regions on Earth, and one of the quietest, too, if you listen, not just for sound, but for movement. Here, the Earth is not still. It breathes with magma, whispers and tremors, K-size, and steam. Subduction happens along most of this ring, the Pacific Plate. Massive and restless, dives beneath the edges of its neighbors. In doing so, it creates chains of volcanoes on land and ridges beneath the sea, in the Andes. The Nazca Plate dives under South America, pushing mountains skyward and heating the crust from below. In Japan, the Pacific Plate bends and buckles under the Eurasian Plate, sending molten rock up into island volcanoes that glow against the evening sky. This is the rhythm of the ring: downward pressure, upward fire, tension, release, collapse, creation. Some volcanoes here erupt violently. Mount St. Helens, with its sudden roar in 1980, sending ash across an entire continent. Or Mount Pinatubo, whose 1991 eruption cooled the entire planet. Its particles high enough to shadow sunlight. Others simmer quietly, their lava slow and smooth, like sleep thickening across stone. Not all eruptions are loud. Not all fire is angry. Sometimes the earth simply leaks what it cannot hold any longer. To understand the ring of fire, you must understand what pressure feels like in rock. Imagine something soft but slow. Rock that bends over eons, yet holds its shape in your lifetime. As plates move, the edges press. Some rocks melt, some fracture, some grind, then pause, then release in an earthquake, or an eruption, or just a long, trembling breath. This place is not a border. It is a threshold. It is where the planet invites you to witness its inner life. Not in full, but in glimpses. Steam rising from cracks, ash falling like snow, lava glowing like the core of an ancient thought. There's something oddly peaceful in watching volcanoes, because they move on timescales that ignore you. They don't erupt for show. They don't rise for glory. They exist because pressure exists, and they release it when they must. You too might know that feeling of needing a valve, of holding too much, of being reshaped by things you cannot see, only feel in places like Hawaii. The magma comes from a deeper source, not subduction, but a hot spot in the middle of a plate. But in the ring of fire, heat rises because something else is sinking. One plate disappears, another cracks open, and from that moment of letting go, something new arrives. Isn't that always the way? When you stand on the slopes of a volcano within the ring, you're standing on borrowed land, new crust, fresh from the deep. But it is not just land. It is story. It is memory. 'Tis the earth's inner truth spoken out loud. You can feel it beneath your shoes, warmth in the stone. You can smell it, the sharpness of sulfur and steam. You can hear it, the quiet rumble, the sudden silence, the waiting. Some people fear volcanoes, and yes, they can destroy, change landscapes, rewrite coastlines, but they can also make soil rich. They create islands. They build new mountains for future snow to rest upon. They remind us that nothing here is permanent, and that even destruction has a purpose. In this ring of transformation, there are patterns you can follow. Every eruption echoes something older. Every tremor is part of a larger breath. And if you listen closely, the ring of fire speaks, not in warnings, but in wisdom, not in fear, but in truth. There are places on Earth where the ground is too still, where tension builds for decades, centuries. Then, all at once, release dot, like the 9.0 magnitude quake near Japan in 2011, like the one that reshaped Sumatra in 2004. These moments are not punishments. They are part of a long, slow exhale that began long before us. It's strange to think of calm in the ring of fire, but it's there. In the way magma settles after a release, in the way mountains stand for centuries, holding their silence until it is time to speak again. That's the .com, not absence of movement, but balance between pressure and peace. You, too, are shaped by pressure, and perhaps, like the volcanoes of the ring, you carry fire that must one day rise, not in rage, not in noise, but in release, a truth becoming land, a story taking shape, a part of you coming up from below. Let's follow one plate, not all of them, not the dozens that puzzle together to shape the Earth's surface, just one, the Pacific plate, a great, slow traveler, silent, immense, always moving. It holds much of the ocean you know by name. It stretches from the coasts of California to Japan, from New Zealand to the Aleutian Islands. Beneath its blue surface lies basalt, cooled from ancient lava, rippled with scars and ridges. It is not quiet, it is simply patient. You begin in the middle in the vast, deep Pacific. The plate here is young, where molten rock still rises from a ridge. New crust is being born, silently, invisibly. It cools fast in the ocean's chill, hardens into black stone, begins its long drift outward. Imagine being that stone, fresh from the mantle, warmed by fire, now plunged into water. You begin to move slowly outward from the ridge, pushed gently by forces you cannot see, the spreading floor, the momentum of the earth's deep breath. At first, life is calm. You are underwater, far from coasts, far from conflict. But nothing in tectonics stays unchanged. Over millions of years, you drift toward the edges, and there you meet others. Collision is inevitable. On one side, you meet the North American plate, on another, the Philippine plate, to the south, the Indo-Australian. Each meeting is different. Some are slow convergences, some are sideways slides, some are collisions full of fire and resistance. You don't stop. You shift at the edge near California. You slide past another plate in what's called a transform boundary, the famous San Andreas Fault. Here, your crust grinds alongside another, not crashing, not sinking, but scraping. Rocks catch, stress, builds, and then a quake. That's not chaos. That's a correction. Tectonic plates don't argue, they adjust. In the land above, the homes, the rivers, the people all move with you, though they may never feel it. Farther west, you meet resistance. At the Mariana Trench, you begin to dive. You, the Pacific plate, so broad and proud, descend beneath a smaller one. This is abduction, a surrender, not of weakness, but of purpose. You give yourself back to the mantle, melting slowly, fueling volcanoes above. The deepest trench in the world is formed here, not from collision, but from one plate bowing below another. And yet, even as you subduct in one place, you rise in another dot. Near Hawaii, a hot spot punches through your middle, sending up a fountain of molten rock that forms island after island. As you drift above, the big island now, then Maui, then Oahu, then Kauai, each one older than the last, marking your path like footprints in lava. This is your legacy, a necklace of islands, beads of volcanic time. Sometimes plates break, cracks form, new microplates are born, old ones vanish, but you, the Pacific plate, remain among the largest. Traveling westward still, your edges are not clean. They fray, they buckle, they host earthquakes, volcanoes, and trenches, and your journey is never finished. Now imagine this journey on a map, but the map must stretch not just across space, but across time. Millions of years, centuries as seconds, oceans that weren't there, now opened. Mountains that weren't mountains, now rising. You've crossed from places that no longer look the same. You've carried islands, you've been reshaped again and again. The earth is not solid, it flows in slow geometry. You are a part of that, even as you sleep, even as you stand still, because even the ground is always in motion. You've walked the ground of continents, felt the plates beneath your feet shift, slow as centuries, deep as memory. But the world you know is not the world that always was. There were others, earlier Earths, composed of continents long forgotten, joined in shapes we no longer see. They had names: Rodinia, Gondwana, Pangaea, names like spells, fragments of a geology written across eons. They were not ideas. They were real, though no one was there to witness them form. No cities, no humans. Stone, slowly, inevitably coming together. Rodinia was perhaps the earliest supercontinent, older than time as we measure it, brought together over a billion years ago, its center resting near Earth's equator. There were no flowers, no birds, just shallow seas and microbial mats, barely more than silence. Yet, the continents gathered, crashing softly together, shaping mountains whose ghosts remain. When Rodinia broke, the ocean filled the gaps. Land pulled apart, and a new earth began. Then came Gondwana, a southern world, an ancient fusion of what would become Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, and India. Gondwana thrived beneath the southern skies, spanning hundreds of millions of years. Dinosaurs walked its jungles. Rivers carved its stone. Its legacy is still visible. Look at a map, how the coastlines of Brazil and West Africa still seem to lean into each other. It's like puzzle pieces that once were whole. They were. You're living on the remnants of a continent that died not by disaster, but by drifting apart. And then there was Pangaea, the last of the supercontinents, and the most famous 250 million years ago. All the land on Earth was gathered into one single mass, a world with one ocean, one shore, one silent rotation beneath the stars. Imagine standing on its edge, looking across a horizon that circles the entire planet. A beach that never ends. No Atlantic, no Indian, just Pangaea, the great global sea. But unity never lasts forever. Pangaea began to break. Tension built. The crust stretched, cracked, sighed. Rifts opened. Oceans returned. Land forgot the shape it once held. What broke Pangaea was not violence, it was inevitability. Earth's surface does not rest. It cannot. Tectonics does not preserve. It recycles, and so the world as you know it came into being from loss, from movement, from memory fading. Yet nothing is truly lost. Beneath our continents lie the roots of those older lands. Creighton's stable cores of ancient rock carry, the chemical echoes of Rodinia and Gondwana. Land remembers, even when it changes shape, even when it drifts across the planet. It holds on to something ancient, something buried, and you walk upon it every day, never knowing how old the ground beneath your steps truly is. What, then, is a supercontinent? A gathering, a reunion, a brief moment of stillness in a world always shifting. They come and go, Rodinia, Gondwana, Pangaea, and someday another dot, because Earth's crust continues to move. Continents still drift, and the forces that once joined the land together will do so again. Geologists call it the supercontinent cycle, a rhythm beyond our lifetimes, slow heartbeat of the planet. Perhaps in 200 million years, another supercontinent will form. Massia, Pangaea, Ultima, names dreamed for futures we'll never see, but the Earth will remember. It always does. The Earth doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, but sometimes, when the strain becomes too much, it speaks in tremors, a deep, low language beneath the surface, beneath understanding. Not angry, just honest. You feel it as a quake, a sudden jolt, the rattling of windows, the swaying of lamps, the way your body stiffens before your mind catches up. But this is not destruction. This is dialogue at the edges of tectonic plates. Tension builds. 4 years, decades, centuries. 2 plates. Push or pull or grind side by side. Their boundaries locked in silent struggle. Nothing moves. Not right away. Not until the friction is overcome. Not until the stress exceeds the strength of rock holding. And then, suddenly, the crust slips. A release, a shift. The ground moves, and in that instant, balance is restored. It is easy to fear this. Motion. See only the chaos. The aftermath, cracked roads, tilted door frames, quiet panic in the chest. But the quake itself is nature finding equilibrium. It is not punishment. It is process, like stretching a joint after sleep, like breathing out after holding tension too long. The earth resets itself with motion, and in this trembling, there is pattern. Seismologists watch for foreshocks. Listen to the aftershocks. Study the shape of waveforms as they ripple through the planet. Each quake tells a story: where the stress was, how deep, how fast the rupture ran. It is a message written in pressure and release. Conversation you are just beginning to understand in some places. These conversations happen often. Japan, Chile, California, all perched along faults where plates meet. Like slow dancers with firm hands, communities learn to listen. Buildings sway instead of breaking. Children practice drills, not to be afraid, but to move with the rhythm of a living earth. They know the language of quakes. Not the words, but the pauses between them. The meaning hidden in motion. There is also quiet between the quakes. Long stretches of silence that lull you into stillness. But still, the stress builds. It is easy to forget that peace can hold pressure, too. And that when something finally shifts, the world feels different. Not because it changed all at once, but because it had been changing invisibly for a long, long time. You carry earthquakes inside you, not the destructive kind, with the tremors of choice, of pressure, of emotion unspoken. How long have you held tension in your body, your breath, your thoughts? What small fault lines run through your memories? And what would happen if you let them move? To be still is not to be unchanging. Stillness can hold great tension. Stillness can quake. And when it does, when you shift, you make space for something new to settle. You are not broken. You are realigning. Like continents, you adjust. There is a type of quake called a slow slip event. It happens quietly, over days or weeks, without dramatic shaking. The ground moves, but gently. So gently that no one feels it. Only instruments know. Only deep sensors register the whisper of motion. Yet the effect is real. The crust has changed, and life continues. Never knowing what has already shifted. Sometimes your changes are like this, unfelt, unseen, but still reshaping everything beneath you. The pressure has not vanished, but you've let some of it go. And that is growth. You don't need to erupt to be evolving. You don't need collapse to be in motion. Sometimes you just need to move a little, to let the old stress find a path through to let the earth inside you speak. Deep beneath your resting body, heat builds slowly. A pressure older than memory, older than stone. Molten rock magma waits, not with urgency, not with rage, just presence, held in silence, held in patience. But even patience reaches a point where something must move. The earth has lungs, and volcanoes are how it breathes out. Each eruption, not a scream, but a long, hot exhalation from the planet's deeper self. A letting go of pressure that could no longer wait. Above ground, you see only the fire, but the lava, the plume of ash on it, feels violent. But it is release, a slow motion process, years in the making. Each volcano holds its own timeline. Some sleep for centuries, then wake in a single night. Others whisper constantly, a steady trickle, a hiss of steam. A lava lamp of continents inside the volcano. Magma rises through narrow conduits, vents in the crust where weakness meets heat, and when the roof can no longer hold, it breaks. The magma surges upward. What once was trapped becomes sky. Volcanoes are not always mountains. Some are craters. Some are underwater ridges hidden in darkness. Many do not look like the idea you carry, but all share the same rhythm. Build, release, rebuild. It is the cycle of breath, the cycle of emotion. It's a cycle of change. From destruction comes creation. That lava you fear becomes land, fresh earth, new coastline. The island of Hawaii rose like this, not in a single day, but in countless eruptions stacked over time. Molten fire cooling into paradise. What if something inside you was becoming land? There is a beauty in that process, a faith in transformation, to erupt is not to be dangerous. It is to be honest about what must leave. The heat inside is not meant to stay inside forever. The pressure isn't a flaw. It's part of being made from something living. Scientists study volcanoes, not just to predict them, but to understand how planets evolve. Volcanoes tell the story of Earth's inner workings, what it's made of, how it shifts, how it builds and rebuilds. You can learn that story, too, from the way you change, from what finally surfaces after long silence. Volcanic ash nourishes soil. It seems strange, but from eruption comes richness. Fields near volcanoes become lush. Plants thrive. Its fruits grow sweeter. The fire gives what the calm could not. What if your most difficult moments left behind something fertile? There's a volcano in Iceland called Eyjafjallajökull. It erupted in 2010, grounding plains, darkening skies, but the ash settled, and later the ground was richer. Farmers planted new crops. This is what eruption can do. Not erase, but change. Not destroy, but renew. Some volcanoes erupt without lava. They collapse inward. The pressure leaves not through fire, but through emptiness. These are called calderas, a quiet end. A sudden shift that leaves a wide, deep bowl where a mountain once stood. And over time, those bowls fill with water, becoming lakes. Still, beautiful, deep. Crater Lake, Lake Toba, silence where fire once lived. What if the space left behind could hold peace? Inside you, there may be volcanoes, old heat, old pressure, thing rising quietly toward release. You don't need to erupt in anger, but you do need to let go, to let some part of yourself flow outward, to cool, to harden, to become land that someone else might walk upon. You are not dangerous. You are dynamic. You are not unstable. You are evolving, and your eruptions, your breathings out, are how your inner landscape makes itself known. You live by clocks, the ticking hands, the glowing digits. You count minutes, hours, days. You race toward deadlines. You mark anniversaries. But Earth does not keep time the way you do. Its calendar is carved in cliffs. Its journal is pressed into layers of rock. Its memory runs deeper than dates. Geologic time is the rhythm of the unhurried. It is the slow dance of crust and core, of pressure building and land unfolding, of mountains rising not in centuries, but in the hush of millions of years. Stone doesn't rush. It waits, and yet it changes. You might stand beside a granite wall, solid, cold, unmoving, but that granite was once molten, formed deep within the earth, lifted by tectonic force, exposed by the peeling back of softer layers. What you see as stillness is just a snapshot of something long in motion. The Grand Canyon is a timeline, not a hole in the earth, but a story told in sediment. Each stripe of color, a chapter. Each layer, a world that was limestone from ancient seas, sandstone from deserts lost to time, shale pressed from swamps that vanished before mammals breathed. You can read it if you listen with your eyes. A single centimeter of rock might take 1,000 years to form. It's not built, but pressed, compressed, hardened by time and silence. You cannot watch it happen, but you can know that it does, just like growth in your own life that appears overnight, but took years to shape. Fossils are the bookmarks of deep time. A fern caught in mud, a trilobite trapped in sand, a bone buried by accident, then remembered by stone. These are not decorations. They are reminders that time forgets nothing, simply presses memory down until it becomes part of the land. You might walk across an old seabed and not even know it. Beneath your feet, the memory of coral reefs, of fish that no longer exist, of tides that rolled over deserts long before the continents found their shape. Land travels, time carries it, okay? And you walk unknowingly across chapters of ancient oceans, volcanoes, built land, but erosion gives it shape. Rain wears down mountains. Wind sculpts cliffs, ice gouges, valleys. This too is time, not dramatic, but persistent. Time that whispers, I will reshape you, but gently. You think of yourself in years, but your atoms, they come from stars older than Earth. Calcium from supernova, iron from collapsing cores, carbon born in the heat of stellar breath. In a way, you are made of geologic time. You carry it in your bones. You are not apart from Earth's long memory. You are part of it. Even your most fleeting thoughts occur inside a brain made of minerals, inside your skull. Molecules arranged by ancient processes fire off sparks that you call a moment. But the stone in your body remembers longer than the story you attach to now. Mountains crumble, but even in their collapse, they are measured in patience. The Himalayas rise from the clash of continents, but they also erode grain by grain into the rivers below. The soil in a rice field might once have been the tip of a sacred peak. What feels like loss is just relocation in the language of Earth. Tectonic plates move slowly, few centimeters, a year, the width of your fingernail. But they do not stop. And over eons, continents, cross oceans, India once floated far from Asia. Then it collided, rising into the roof of the world. This is not history. This is still happening. Right now, Australia is drifting north. The Atlantic is widening. Africa is inching toward Europe. You just can't feel it because you're smaller than the clock. But just because you can't feel it doesn't mean it isn't real. Some of your own changes happen this way, so slowly, they're invisible, until one day you realize you become something you weren't before. Not suddenly, but steadily, like continents drifting. When scientists talk about geologic time, okay, they use unfamiliar words: eons, epochs, extinctions, uplifts. But what they're really describing is patience. Time big enough to hold the birth and death of entire landscapes. Time big enough to forgive the chaos. Time kind enough to let everything become something else. There's a kind of comfort in knowing it's how long it all takes, that nothing you rush will outpace the mountain, that no mistake will scar the earth forever, that all scars become canyons, become stories, become beauty. You might think you're too late to change, that you've taken too long. But Earth says otherwise. It says, change takes time. It says, form takes pressure. It says, you are not slow. You are unfolding. The ground beneath you feels firm, but firmness is an illusion made of slow motion. The continents drift, not in silence, but in persistence. Africa pushes north. Australia moves closer to Asia. The Atlantic Ocean widens by a few centimeters. Each year, you don't feel it beneath your shoes, but the movement is steady, like a breath you've forgotten how to notice. Even now, as you lie still, the earth is rearranging itself. Not in decades, but in deep rhythms, in the long inhale and exhale of geologic time. The Himalayas grow a little taller. Pacific shrinks a little more. Ridges form in the seabed as plates press forward like ancient travelers with nowhere to be. The land you live on is a raft floating on the mantle's warm currents, not lost, but never anchored. Beneath it, rock moves like thick honey, slow but constant, enough to change everything if given enough time. The first maps showed the world as fixed continents locked in place, a puzzle of permanence. But that was before we found the clues in rocks and fossils split by oceans, in magnetic minerals aligned like compass needles, frozen in past positions. They whispered a truth. The land does not stay where it starts. You may know that once there was a single giant landmass, Pangaea. All the continents we know now once touched Africa beside North America. India cradled against Antarctica. Europe brushing South America's edge. a moment in Earth's long story when the puzzle was whole. But Pangaea wasn't the beginning. It was just one formation in a cycle of drifting and reunion. Before Pangaea, there was Gondwana, before Gondwana Rodinia, and after this age, the continents will touch again. Perhaps in 250 million years, it will join to form a new supercontinent, a future Pangaea. You won't be there to see it, but the motion is already underway. When continents collide, they create mountains. When they pull apart, they make oceans. Your map, the one on your wall, your phone, your passport, is a photograph, not of now, but of a moment soon gone, because the land is already leaving the position you memorized. Think of Iceland, sitting on the mid-Atlantic ridge, where two plates move away from each other. Each year, the island grows, not by much, but by fire and force. Magma rises to fill the gap. The Earth's crust is created by letting go. Or look to the Red Sea, where the African and Arabian plates are pulling apart. What is now a sea may one day become an ocean. Someday, in deep time, Africa may split in two. The rift has begun. Q are living during a continental pause between shifts. The Pacific plate is not only moving, it is rotating, like a massive stone carousel. Hawaii, born from a hotspot, will someday drift away from its volcano. New islands will rise behind it. The old ones will erode, fade, vanish. This is the price of creation, to exist, then move on. Even places that feel ancient, like the Alps, the Rockies, the Andes, are young in geologic time. They rose because of movement. They will fall because of it too. Erosion, gravity, the pull of water and wind will humble even the tallest peaks. Everything carved by motion will eventually soften back into the sea that waits patiently below. And in this slow dance, life adapts. Species evolve as continents shift. Habitats stretch, split, combine. Marsupials in Australia, lemurs in Madagascar. Fossils of the same fern found in both South America and Africa. Geography is history, and the map is just a moving shadow of what life has followed. You are part of this movement. Your ancestors crossed continents on foot, on ice, by sea, not knowing that the very land beneath them was also moving. You carry in your blood the memory of migrations written not only by footsteps, but by the drifting of home itself. If the earth can shift so slowly, so surely, then perhaps so can you. Perhaps the changes you don't notice are still real, still taking you somewhere new, even if you don't feel the difference each day, even if you can't tell you've moved at all. Some changes happen so slowly they feel like nothing, but they are not nothing. They are the beginning of everything. A single moment of pressure on a fault line, a quiet stretch in the ocean floor, a decision so small you almost missed it, carving a new path through the crust of your life. Continents don't ask for permission. They simply continue. They meet. They leave. They do not explain why they separated. They do not mourn what they once touched. They just drift with patience. As you lie in stillness, your body pressed softly into the bed, you might imagine the world has paused with you. That nothing stirs. That silence means stillness. But beneath you, something continues. The crust you rest upon is not the end. It's a thin layer, fragile and floating over the deeper breadth of the earth. Beneath it, the mantle moves like warm wax. Beneath that, the core pulses with heat and spin. Even higher, above where you lie, the atmosphere shifts. Clouds drift, winds curl. As particles from the sun tickle the magnetic field that quietly guards you. You are surrounded by motion. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of your body against the floor of the world. Let yourself sink, not down, bit inward, into the thought that the earth is not still just because you are. Every second you rest, tectonic plates continue their ancient shuffle, noiseless but relentless. Some pull away from each other, making space for the ocean to widen. Some press forward, crashing, grinding, folding into mountain ranges that rise so slowly. No, I can see it happen. Still, they rise. Elsewhere, a fault line trembles, then resets. A volcano exhales a whisper of heat through a crack in the sea. The magnetic poles drift by fractions of degrees, while the molten core below spins slightly faster than the surface above. Everything that holds you, everything that cradles your resting body is moving in a rhythm older than breath. You think of movement as a thing you do, but here, now, you are moved, not by will, but by belonging to something bigger than thought. Even your atoms vibrate. The cells in your blood hum with electric quiet. The fluids in your ears sway with Earth's gravity. Your very bones are made of minerals forged in the heat of geologic time. So when you rest, you do not fall out of rhythm. You fall into it. You become part of the Earth's memory, part of its patience, part of its becoming. There is no end to this movement, only layers of stillness riding on layers of change. You might imagine that you're held by a perfect sphere, but the Earth is not a perfect shape. It bulges slightly at the equator, pressed outward by its own rotation. Even the planet's form is softened by motion. And you are resting on a planet that breathes, spins, stretches, and sings in wavelengths so slow your body forgets to listen. But it listens anyway. Beneath your city, or your home, or your field of stars, lies a piece of Earth's crust that was never meant to last forever. It will fracture, or slide, or sink. It will be consumed and made new again, not in your lifetime, but in some lifetime. The bedrock is not the end of the story. It is one layer in a song whose verses take millions of years. And yet, in this long song, your moment is not meaningless. You are made of Earth's past. The calcium in your teeth once slept in limestone. The iron in your blood came from stars that exploded before the Earth had shape. You are not just resting on the Earth. You are resting in it, up it, with it. So when you breathe slowly, know that your lungs expand in rhythm with something older than lungs. When you drift into sleep, remember that sleep is part of the cycle too, a way to return to the quiet that made you. The Earth turns, a teast. The moon pulls at the oceans. Your heart slows, and everything is held in the gentle gravity of belonging. You do not need to move to be part of motion. You do not need to speak to be part of a story. Even in stillness, you are written into time. The mountains above and the mantle below will never meet, but they shape each other, just as your quiet nights shape your brightest days. There is no need to see the movement to be changed by it. The earth beneath your resting body asks nothing of you tonight, only that you listen softly, to what is always becoming.